of our first annual Southside Summit. We are really in luck tonight. We have one of our newest board members, Nicole Duxbury, who is going to be leading us through tonight's session, so you won't hear a ton from me. I am going to quickly turn it over to her, but please know that you have our thanks and appreciation for joining us this evening, and I will be providing some summary thoughts at the very, very end. But thank you especially to our panelists for joining us tonight, and thank you each for being here.
Thanks, Tabitha. And a big thank you to Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association and Tabitha and Ashley and Grace who are with us tonight for putting on this event. A couple logistical pieces. It is helpful if everybody stays on mute throughout the presentations. Yeah, so for tonight, in a couple seconds, I'm going to introduce the panelists and they'll say a quick hello. And then each panelist, each organization will have 10 minutes to present. And after the presentation, we'll check in with Julie, who is our graphic artist here tonight, who will be doing a live painting based on what she's experiencing and capturing from the conversation. And after that, we have a few questions from Powderhorn Park that the panelists will respond to. And after those questions have been responded to, it will be opened up to the community and you can submit your questions via the chat to Grace, who will then post them one at a time and we'll work through them. All right. Well, it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you from the Cultural Wellness Center, we have Elder Atum and Minkhara. If you want to say a brief hello, and then I'll introduce the next two. And you're on mute, I believe.
It's great to see you. Thank you for inviting me, and love to get to know you better. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Minkhara. I'm glad to be here. I'm with the Cultural Wellness Center. I'm the griot psychology and psychiatry at the Cultural Wellness Center. And it's good to see you this evening.
All right, and we also have Elliott, Butay, and Sue Abderholden from NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. If you'd like to say a brief hello.
Hi, I'm Sue with NAMI Minnesota. Very pleased to be here and really honored to be sharing the screen with the Cultural Wellness Center.
And I'm Elliott Butay. Hello, glad to be here.
Wonderful. And just a quick reminder, it was on the screen before we started, but this meeting is being recorded. Looks like most of you have your video off, but you're welcome to keep it off if you do not want to be recorded. Okay, so we'll begin with the Cultural Wellness Center. You have your 10 minutes to give your presentation.
You have to unmute, Elder. Elder Atum, you're muted.
It's great to see everyone, and I recognize Nicole, and it's really good to see you on the job. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Tabitha. I think that PPNA does such good work, and we have continued to want to partner with you. And so, again, started this year intentionally finding a way. So when we got this invitation, I thought, well, this will give me a chance to sit on the panel and share just a couple of things. The Cultural Wellness Center has been around since 1996. We did a 2-year door knocking, door to door, sitting on the porch in the park, review with people about infant mortality is how we started the conversation. But certainly about health and about what is health and why are the chronic conditions within the African community in particular, but chronic conditions throughout the communities, cultural communities, why those chronic conditions were not responding to health care and medicine as other communities were. People talk about it being health disparities. What we talked about is what we wanted to know was Yes, there is a significant number of people who do not respond, but what we wanted to know is, what is it that the people who do respond well, those who do continue to live, those who do continue to have healthy babies, what is it in that resiliency that we could build on? After 2 years of discussing, conversing with, following people around, and having them give us instructions, many elders from various cultural communities, we really articulated a theory that we call the people's theory. And it is that individualism, loss of culture, and loss of community makes you sick. And just the opposite of that is, if you have culture, if culture is intact, if culture is carried forward, if culture is valued, if culture is healthy and well and rich in every aspect of life, we will be healthier. One aspect of culture that we knew was core to health was community. The various cultural communities talked about being with, once again, the opposite of individualism, but being with someone and being in community and being connected and belonging. All of those were cultural values that really do play very strongly in survival, in resiliency, and in the ways that many of our people, have really taken care of themselves. I think Brother Minkhara and I wanted tonight to say, in view of the people's theory, one thing that he and I wanted to share a little bit tonight is that that's exactly what I do to stay healthy. I wanted to dedicate the work of cultural wellness because of my own life work, living in Mississippi, having my children, many very early. Some of the reasons that my children live, the reason that my children were strong and healthy, and they are men, African-American men. The reason they survived, my father survived, my brother survived, was because of this cultural connection, this cultural self-study, and the community belonging, where you had aunts and uncles and people who you didn't even know were not biological kin. So the kinship network really gave us the capacity for greater resiliency. And so I wanted to see if other people experienced that. And the answer that we came up with was absolutely. And that was one of the answers that we wanted to roll out. So, Brother Minkhara?
I think so. Thank you, Elder Atum, for that, because I think the thing that it makes me think about is really how we articulate success at the Cultural Wellness Center and what it means to have success. And I think the big connector for us is how people are connected to family and community, how people are expressing that sense of belonging, because I think at the core of what we imagine to be healing on the ground is that you have this whole being that is connected to this larger sense of self. So this this community, this family, that there is this individual that has been, in some ways, I think, as a result of the way the society practices being together, produces the individual. And that what we're attempting to do is to say that really at the core of healthy person is a healthy person's connected to a healthy healing community. And that takes practice in a society where we have really intentionally created a system that forces division, that forces individuality, and forces separation in order that we can have pieces of survival versus the connected thriving that happens when you have a whole ecosystem that's functioning to provide, to protect, and to secure itself. So that is part of what we think about in terms of cultural wellness and what it means. And there, I think, are lots of examples that we could talk about as we talk tonight about what it means to practice cultural wellness as a form and an art of self-healing.
So cultural wellness then means that if I'm in crisis, there's someone to help me with that. And when they're in crisis, in return, I have them. So we know that the people next door, as I grew up, and people talk about this all the time, we had people who shared food and shared clothes and shared all kinds of things. There was never a point when we felt like we were totally alone. Well, that is, for us, we think about it as a cultural wellness approach to living a life, building community. So a success is that if I'm doing well, I'm going to help those who are not. And when I'm not, then others are going to help me. And this whole sense of giving, we talked earlier about a form of success is that statement that people have heard so often that says, for those for whom much is given, much is expected. Well, that's one of the things that we turn around and say, for whom anything is given, the expectation is that you're going to end up having to give back. And once you start giving back, that is help. So success for me is to be able to give back to those who have given to me and to make sure that I keep building that system. That would be the ecosystem that we're talking about. So thank you. I think the Cultural Wellness Center embodies that in our work, in our staff, and in our governance system. And so we want to continue to say cultural wellness is really an approach to living, being, and being healthy and belonging.
Thank you so much to Elder and to Minkhara, and we also want to thank all of the other participants and contributors and members and people and community members of the Cultural Wellness Center who have contributed to all of that ongoing work. I'm just still hearing success is giving back to those who have given to me, and it really creates such a vision of what we can be together.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now it is, again, with great pleasure that we'll turn it over to Sue Abderholden and Elliott Butay with NAMI. And go ahead, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, so yeah, take your full 10, 11 minutes.
Thank you. So NAMI was actually founded back in 1976 by a group of moms. So you can always remember how to pronounce NAMI, at least in the Midwest, is NAMI Mommies. They're the ones who really came together. And it was because of 2 federal lawsuits that caused the state of Minnesota to have to actually add staff at the state institutions. So they decided they were going to close down the Hastings State Institution in Hastings, Minnesota. And these moms came together and said, if you close them down, you need to take that money and build community mental health services. You can't take it and just put it in the other institutions. And they actually formed a group. Their first name was called Fed Up, Families for the Emotionally Disturbed United for Progress, which might have been a name we should have kept. And they actually went to the Capitol, and they were successful in getting the first money for community mental health services. It was called Sharing Life in the Community. And one of the legislators was quoted as saying, we'll do anything, just call off the mothers. And so never underestimate the power of mothers when they're fighting for their children. We went on, of course, to grow. And part of our mission is really to champion justice, dignity, and respect, which I think are important words because people with mental illness have often been pushed to the sidelines, you know, in our community and in our world. But also to do that through education, support, and advocacy. And so, you know, I think this notion of not wanting to travel a journey alone, that you can't go through something difficult like that, is really important at NAMI. We don't have any mental health professionals on staff. Pretty much everyone who is at NAMI as either board member, volunteer, or staff person either lives with a mental illness or has family members. I have family members. So we're coming at that from that kind of lived experience and knowing that what we learned along this journey could be really helpful to someone else. And because it is a very lonely journey, again, because, you know, it's better now, but 40 years ago, people weren't talking about this at all. It really helped to connect to someone else and to learn from their experience. One of my favorite quotes is, we make the road by walking. And so, you know, these families, people with mental illnesses and their families really came together to say, you know, what should our mental health system look like? What should those supports be in the community? You know, and the importance of things like, you know, housing and food and healthcare all were a really important part, but also the fact that you wouldn't be alone. And so our peer-led support groups, so we train people with mental illness and family members to lead the support groups. All of our education classes are actually taught by family members or people with lived experience. And I think that's an important part. And then advocacy is a huge part of what we do. While we've tried to raise public awareness so that we can talk about this openly, if we're struggling with our mental health and, you know, focusing on mental wellness as well, then what is our system? How does our system prevent that from actually happening so that, you know, our response to a mental health crisis is a police response? How do we change that? And how do we look at all the people who are homeless, who have a serious mental illness? Why are they homeless? And what can we change the public policies? So I think that's kind of a big part of what we do. Elliott, do you want to kind of talk about some of the equity issues that we're working on?
Sure. So it is a major goal of our strategic plan. And we have, we have several classes that we're now teaching in Spanish and targeted for different cultural communities. So Mental Health 101, and new videos and resources for different cultural communities. And we also got a grant recently that will be for support groups for BIPOC people. And to support one of the presentations our volunteers give us called In Our Own Voice. And that is just really telling their stories. So I'm the criminal justice coordinator at NAMI. So my work is about advocating, and I coordinate the efforts to decriminalize mental illnesses in Minnesota. And there is a lot of, we partner with a lot of justice professionals to do In Our Own Voice presentations. And it is kind of amazing. I don't think people identify their own struggles with mental health sometimes, but it is also, I think, incredible for people to just say it out loud and to hear what people have gone through, and that it's not actually that strange, but it's pretty normal, especially for, I think, our police and corrections officers, people like that. It's really important for them to hear that. So that's some of the things that we've done. We're also engaging a lot of training every month on different cultural views and anti-racism training and cultural awareness. So our staff and volunteers are all engaged in that work. And then I think, like I said, I'm the criminal justice coordinator, and so it's hard to talk about the criminal justice system and not talk about inequities. So I think that is a big part of our push for more equity in the mental health system is that when there's not a fully built mental health system, the default is the criminal justice system. And the criminal justice system historically disproportionately impacts Black people and people of color. So we really value that work, diverting people from arrest, from jail time, from incarceration, and really helping them get the treatment that they need.
And because a lot of our strength is, you know, in addition to the peer education support, is the legislative advocacy. So we also have worked closely with particularly the BIPOC mental health professionals about what are the barriers. So we were, you know, we helped advocate to make sure that Native healers were part of the big opioid bill 2 years ago. We're looking at eliminating some of the barriers for health and wellness activities. And, you know, also looking at having a more systemic mental health crisis response across the state. So again, we're not relying on police when people are in crisis. So you know, I think that, I think the Wellness Center, Cultural Wellness Center is kind of, you know, boots on the ground. And then we try to, you know, learn from your work and from other people's works and making sure that, especially on the legislative side, that is taken care of and advocating for it. And also making sure that people whose mental wellness is not good and who are really struggling with their symptoms, that they're able to get also the support, culturally informed, culturally appropriate support for them as well. So I think we'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Sue and Elliott. And we also want to thank again all the other members and contributing members of NAMI who have inspired and continue to make this work possible in the community who couldn't be here tonight. I was just feeling so impacted by Elliott's phrase, decriminalize mental illness. The fact that we even have to use that language. Yeah, I was feeling impacted by that. So thank you for bringing that in. So we are going to check in now with our artist, Julie. And Julie, if you have anything working in progress you captured, hi.
Hi, I've been working. It's more of a sketch, so of course it's not quite done. The colors aren't, how it's going to be, but just starting out here. My idea was I responded to something that the first speaker said about community and being, just knowing like the people next door would look out for you or help you or whatever. So like as a person, we're symbolized by the circle. And then when we're near someone, we overlap, we share our auras whenever we're close. And this larger circle symbolizes the greater community that holds it all together. It was pretty simple, geometric. Circles always represent a lot of balance and healing. Orange is a healing color, and often yellow and blue represent sort of the positive, negative, with green, the balance of those two energies. So it's a lot about balance and being held by a larger system. Any questions? Or it's hard to finish a painting in 10 minutes. So
thank you so much,
it
Julie.
takes a while. It takes a while to build the colors. In the beginning it kind of looks, not much, but so. But okay, I'll send it back to you then.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and we'll be continuing throughout the evening. And Grace did put in the chat to everybody, all the attendees, if you have anything that's resonating with you or any inspiration or insight that you're receiving that you would like included in the visual representation of the conversation, you can post that in the chat, and maybe with the qualifier that says for the painting. And because we're just a couple minutes ahead of schedule, do any of the four presenters have anything they want to say after seeing that art piece or in response to one another before we go out to questions?
Just as it relates to the art piece, I certainly have all the colors that you have, Julie. So we are matching, and I didn't even send you a memo. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think the thing that I was caught by, Julie, is we talk about this thing called the sweet spot all the time at the Cultural Wellness Center. And it is represented by a Venn diagram, just like you drew it. And we talk about having multiple knowledge systems overlapping in order to get to a place where we can actually produce the quote unquote space for real healing, for wellness to take place. So intuitively, you've captured really one of the heart pieces of the Cultural Wellness Center, and really how we think about working in community and working across institution to bring both community and institutional knowledge together And you've really represented it in the community aspect of it in terms of how people work together in order to produce the medicine that heals the community. So in fact, that overlap of the yellow and the blue creating the green is what would then go out into the community and create the healing that would actually produce what the relationship is supposed to do, give back. So thank you for that. It's beautiful.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. Thanks for that.
And when I looked at it, I kind of thought one of the NAMI members that I've known for a long time, whose son has very serious schizophrenia, she talks about when she first came to NAMI that it was like someone hugging her and kind of welcoming her into a community. And so that circle, to me, also, I think of a hug, right? That you're really holding on to someone so that they don't fall.
Yeah.
I would say, Sue, it's really good to hear you because we've kind of known each other for a long time. And the work that NAMI does and the work that the Cultural Wellness Center, we've worked on at different times together. And this idea that you advocate at the legislature and different places where policy development work is happening, and at the same time acknowledge that on the ground is the boots on the ground, or the people on the ground, or the people who are experiencing this. And that's what I've known about NAMI, is that it is those who are the greatest teachers about what is referred to as mental illness. It's those who suffer from that particular condition. Well, that's how the Wellness Center does it. If we are the experts, those of us who have suffered tremendously, those of us who have struggled, those of us who have either come close to death, or those of us who have been in places and done things that we know, need to be forgiven. We are the greater teachers. And so what the Cultural Wellness Center tries to really promote is, I think, something that NAMI does too, which is you know more about mental illness than somebody who's been trained in doing mental illness work. And so that's the same thing. So that's the relationship, I think, between your work and our work. Is those who have the condition are the experts in the condition. And that level of support is what you do at a different end of the, at the different end of the spectrum. And we're on one end and you're on the other. But in the middle, once again, Julie brings that together by that sweet spot. So that's really, really powerful.
Well, and you know how much I respect your work, and I just think it's just so important. And while you're working on kind of the wellness piece of your community, we're also working on the end where people aren't well, because it's a continuum. We have been during COVID, because frankly, everyone's mental health is struggling during COVID because we're either very alone or two together. Most families aren't used to being together 24/7, and that can be just as trying, frankly, as being alone. And so we've really been actually pushing some of the things that advocating for some of the things that you have been doing all along in terms of, really looking at sleep and nutrition and connection to others and all those things that help us feel like we're part of a community. Part of that circle that's in the drawing, I think is really important. And we need all of us. I don't think there's any one group that can cover the world, right? And I just think, I'm really honored to be on this panel with you, because I just really, really respect your work. So I think there are some overlays there.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. That was really, go ahead.
Okay, I could share also. I really like what Minkhara said about the overlap and the kind of the push and pull of like institutions and community. And I think just from my own personal experience, I live with a mental illness, live with PTSD, and so navigating that also as a person of color, it really, and then when we have advocacy like that, there would be more providers of color, and that it would be easier for them to be able to provide care for people like me, it really drives it home for me. And you know, just a personal example for me is that, you know, I've been working with a therapist and a prescriber for about a year, and then was interested in in an ADHD diagnosis, and I had a lot of symptoms, but I got a psychologist that did an assessment on me, who was a white man, and basically said, you have all the symptoms of ADHD, and how you should address it is the same way that you would address ADHD, aside probably from taking medication, but you don't have ADHD. It's not, you don't get a diagnosis. And I went back to my therapist, and my prescriber would have known me for a year, and my therapist is a person of color. And, you know, the approach is not, can we put it on paper? Can we document it? The approach is, what's going to work for you in your life to make it so that you can be well? And so I just think of that also when we talk about the communities that have struggled. You know, racism often discredits people's expertise, or says, you know, expertise has to look like a master's degree, and it has to have certain letters after its name. And so, you know, taking that personal experience and then taking it to the legislature, where we can try to find ways where there are serious barriers for people to practice, you know, culturally informed and culturally appropriate care. Yeah, I just, that overlap too, that kind of that push and pull, I think it's interesting. And I think, yeah, we kind of take steps forward, you know, like two different legs, but we keep pushing forward. So
I think, Elliott, I want to just affirm that part of the way that we think about each of ourselves, I mean, as practitioners, as people who are studying ourselves at the Cultural Wellness Center, is in some ways we enter into the Cultural Wellness Center in crisis. I mean, in that there is some sort of thing that the society has pushed us into that forces us to really go on the inner journey. That is the place that I think most people in the society are right now. We are in a place where the only place we can go is inward. There is no outside to go to. There is no other person who can hold you. And that the art and the craft of sitting and meditating and studying together in a way that allows for the inner journey to manifest, to teach us why I am called to express this thing on behalf of my people. So this what we would consider a mental illness is in some ways an expression of what has happened, as I think people like Brother Resma Menikin would say, like, what has happened to your people that has produced this condition that has you express it in this way. And so part of the work that we are, I think, all attempting to articulate is, how do we create that space where all the people in the society, all of the people on this planet can really explore what the conditions are that create this thing that we call mental illness, and that what has happened, that we have gone away from cultural wellness practices that really anchor and ground the spirit of humanity, that really connect us to the soul of the planet and give us an ear to kind of like a larger purpose of what we are here to do. So the crises ultimately, I think, comes out of this hopelessness, this despair that the society leaves us in, and the fear that we will become like the trash that the society produced because it overconsumed everything. So so not to get too complicated, but that really does become the ground that we're attempting to heal, which is really the inside of each of us, that these holes, these voids that have been left as a result of over-objectification of the human spirit, over-objectification of the human condition.
I just would say one more quick thing is that we don't always talk about what do we do at the Cultural Wellness Center. But one of the things that we do is study ourselves. We study the experiences that we have from a cultural point of view, from this system of thought that we operate from. We have researched over and over again, read and listened, and began to put in place something that we suggest as a system of thought. So it starts with spirituality, spirituality, symbol, mythos, harmonium. And symbol, like an example of symbol is language. And an example, of mythos is story, but it's a story that has to do with the concentrated life experiences that we've had, that we want to tell in a way that's like a beautiful metaphor, not the specific, direct, objectified, but a metaphorical description of the process that we've gone from the crisis to the transformation, through all of that that makes us who we are as great and powerful human beings. So that's what we do at the center. We teach classes, we bring people together, we have people speak in many situations where they haven't spoken in this way before. I love it that people can tell the story of their life and don't have to worry about us taking that story and changing it into anything. The story is what it is. The story in itself is a teaching. And so our classes and our coaching, our one-on-one discussions and dialogue, we do lots of the dialogue, ritualistic dialogue and ceremony. And so as I look around the room here tonight, I can see many people who have experienced sitting with us and thinking in some cases there is something wrong with them. And the first thing we have to say is, guess what? There ain't nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. You, as a matter of fact, are expressing exactly what many of us are feeling. And so let's put it into words, but words become action. And so once again, that's what we do. And that's why being in a setting like this for us is really optimal, because we can ask you, what are your thoughts? So we appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I feel like time has just graced us with that extra space where we got to have that additional conversation. Thank you so much. Well, we do have a couple of questions here from Powderhorn Park to get the conversation, I was going to say get it started, but it's definitely already started, to continue it moving forward. And again, as a reminder to all the participants here, any questions that you're beginning to have that you'd like to ask, please do send them to Grace in the chat and she will post them to be asked of the four panelists here. So the first question we have is, in continuing weaving from the conversation that's already been unfolding, how do you define self-care and wellness? And I'm wondering if NAMI wants to begin with that one.
I think we all, sometimes in our society, we think about wellness as the absence of illness, but it really is, it's the positive attributes that come with wellness, right? I mean, having connections to others, being able to, participate in your community, really feeling good about yourself. And so I really kind of hate it when they just talk about the absence of symptoms. It's really, it's just so much more than that. And I think self-care is really, in some ways, individualistic, right? I mean, some people love gardening. To me, please, it's just not my thing. I love to cook. Cooking for me is really self-care. I remember when at one point my husband was very sick, and so taking care of kids and working and all those kinds of things. And for me, self-care was literally sitting in my driveway for 5 minutes in my car before I went into the house, so that I had time to kind of center and think of myself. And it's, especially during the pandemic, people have to think about what are those things that help you feel better, that help you kind of cope with what's going on in the world today. There's so many things that we can't control right now, but we can control those things that help us feel better. So that's the kind of way that we think about it.
Thank you. Elder Minkhara, did you have a response to that one?
Dr. Minkhara, do you want to?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add really is, just to continue to remind myself, as I think about what self-care is. So on one hand, like the individual aspect of caring for ourselves it's cliche in a sense, but it's really pertinent. Like you always, if you're on the plane, they tell you put your mask on first. And so I don't want to ruin that, but it's like in some ways, by doing this thing that seems selfish, like, I need this 5 minutes. It's like, it's really in preparation in order to be in service to. So I'm preparing myself as I take this moment to be in service to, which is why rest is important. Rest is important because now that I've taken the opportunity, the moment to pause, to breathe, to meditate, to be present, to clear myself, to really ask for the energy, the guidance, the force to protect me and to guide me as we work together. That's really what the aim is to really use the practice to fortify myself, to prepare myself. And it demystifies this idea that, like self-care is somehow, that it's somehow supposed to be this radical thing, when in fact it is, but it's so simple that anyone can do it. And you have to just really change the mindset about how you do it. So I think of the idea of I love to cook as this is in service to this thing called family. And I contribute this in order that we can have nourishment. I contribute this in order that we can have space and opportunity to share our thoughts and ideas about what is happening in the world. I prepare this meal so that I can say to my ancestors who gave me recipes, who've given me ways of thinking about preparing food, I can say thank you to them. So now my life becomes ritualized, it becomes ceremonialized, and that I'm doing it again in preparation and in service to that which is also connected to me, my family, my community. I perfect the practice of caring for myself in order to perfect the practice of caring for the people closest to me.
I would add too on just the thoughts of ritual and what we were talking about before of kind of this over objectification of humans, but there is also kind of this, I don't know, hashtag self-care, and I think there's a risk there of it becoming another thing. And I just, that's society, but when you talk about a ritual is not the same thing as a transaction. Like you give something for this reason. And I think the most pertinent kind of thing that comes to mind in our like consumer societies, I give money and I get something back. And so it's really easy, and I mean, really easy for me personally to take self-care, to view it that way. Well, I gotta take a bath tonight because that's my self-care, and then I'll get tomorrow my mental health will be better. And it's really hard to view it that way because it doesn't work that way. And so many times what helps me, takes me by surprise. I'm like, oh, I would never have really tried that. That's not on my self-care list. So I think it's just really important to also put that in there, that it's not a transaction, it's not like 100%. And then I started working, I went down to 80. So I got to get back up to 100. It's like the painting, it's fluid and it's a spectrum. So that's what I think about self-care.
I just think that what everyone has said is when someone says define, how do you define self-care? I think a lot about how do I define myself, and do I know myself? Do I know that my voice is really critical to my existence? Am I able to speak? Am I able to be spoken to and be listened to? And if I'm not, then what do I do about that? So self-care to me is connected to my own knowing myself, loving myself, believing that myself is critical. I say to groups all the time, you are totally acceptable. You are accepted. you do not have to wait for someone else to accept you. So self is a higher state of my understanding of the planet. So that's all. The self. There's a little self and a big self, and which one am I at this moment? You know.
Thank you so much. Yeah, from all four of those contributing responses, I feel like borrowing a teaching that I have received multiple times from Elder Atum of taking a couple breaths before I ask the next question. So much was said. So the next question is, speaking of barriers and barriers to community wellness, what barriers do you think most contribute to what we see in our communities as a lack of community wellness, or a lack of our greatest functioning as a community? Maybe the Cultural Wellness Center wants to begin with this one.
You know, those of you who know us know that the idea of barriers would be where we would start by reversing the idea that barriers is where we start. If there are challenges or barriers, or like a barrier becomes like a wall, you know, as we start to imagine a barrier, a block. And so what we try in the beginning at the Cultural Wellness Center is to really start there by saying, give me a description of what's stopping you. What's stopping you from feeling well, or what's stopping you from feeling. And people give us amazing descriptions of what's stopping them from feeling. And many times it's like being disconnected. So I would have to say that a sense of disconnected, a sense that no one cares, a sense of being alone, a sense that you do not belong, this sense of loneliness. Those are the paralyzing experiences that we hear about, and that we encourage ourselves to say more about, and therefore, as people begin to hear about it, they then begin to open. And as they open, we walk along with people and share in a way that there is a vision that's developed within a very short period of time. Sometimes we talk about 4 and 5 conversations or interactions or times that we spend together. And by the 5th time, people have a vision that goes beyond whatever felt like a blockage or a barrier. So this is both for individuals as well as families, as well as community members and community groups. We want to hear what it is that's stopping your sense of belonging and your sense of yourself as worthy, and as your sense of yourself as valuable and whole. And that's how I would begin to talk about that. And then if it turns out that it's something that cannot be moved without some other form of intervention, we also then talk about, well, what is the intervention that we're going to do together? So that's how I would answer you. I try my best not to think of barriers or blockages or challenges that are that keep us from doing something, but more what's the sense of what's going on, what's the description of what's going on. It can be an individual or collective description, but let's describe it so that we can see what indeed is inside of it. And many, many times what's inside of it can be dealt with or reinterpreted, you know, or turned upside down or opened. So that's how I would answer you. I'm sorry, I don't. The barrier question, I have to deal with the word and the concept first.
Thank you. Sue or Elliott, was there anything you wanted to add to that before we go to the next question?
What I'd like to add is thinking, you know, again, kind of the end of the spectrum. So people who are really, really struggling, you know, with their mental health and have very, you know, serious symptoms. I do see real barriers to their wellness. And part of it is around how our mental health system actually doesn't let people involve their families. You know, they use HIPAA. I always say you don't have to use, HIPAA doesn't require you to be stupid. People can't get through these things by themselves. And so our systems say, no, we're not going to let you, you know, be involved in your family, in your family's care. And that to me is really hard. If you think about someone who's hospitalized for a serious mental illness, how do you connect with them? Have you ever called? They don't have phones in their room. And so you have to hope that someone will pick up the phone, another patient, and get your loved one so that you can connect to them. And I think we've all seen how hard it is during COVID not to be with a loved one when they're hospitalized or in the nursing home. And that happens to people with mental illnesses every single day in a psychiatric unit. And so I think that the barrier in the mental health system is thinking that someone is this, you know, individual, that they don't come with families, that they don't come with community, and we just push them away. And to me, that it is a real barrier. I mean, I absolutely hear what you're saying, Elder, but I think on the system side and for people who are really struggling, we just make it worse. And it's one of my most frustrating things. And we also kind of talk about, I kind of created this, but it's a no hot dish illness. That was was a word I learned when I came to Minnesota. You know, you don't get food brought to you. You don't get well cards. You don't get people coming to visit if your mental health is really struggling. And that to me pushes, again, community is healing, and that it just destroys your community.
Well, I certainly want to thank you for what you just said, Sue. I think this is going back to the sweet spot and the overlapping circle, is that when mental institutions, mental health systems, each of us, I know that the isolation of that institution, the isolation of that hospital, where community members cannot go, must not go, family cannot go, similar to not having information, not having knowledge, not having access. That's why I think NAMI and the Cultural Wellness Center can partner. Because at this point, we have to partner to bring a way of thinking about things that is hopeful, and a way of thinking about things that's also personal, spiritual, and cultural. And that's where we want to come together, because the institutional isolation, like the individual isolation, allows a perception of life and humanity to really be very narrow and brutal. And so institutions cannot exist outside of communities And communities have to create their own institutions because yes, there's going to be pain and sickness and struggle, but it does not, at this point in time, need to become, as you mentioned earlier, Elliott, you don't criminalize it. You don't make sickness of the mind a crime or a something awful, and change the person who's experiencing that into something other than a human being. So those are practices that we have to come together to work on. So I do appreciate Sue you saying that, because you're right. And I have been in that situation with many other people in my family. But the part of fighting it has been to make sure that lots of us are there so that that experience in the institution cannot go on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So much dimensionality I keep sensing coming in as the conversation unwinds. And in answering that second question, we began talking about the third one, naturally, which is how can communities work together to increase access to self-care resources, it says, and let's open it up to community wellness in general. So how can communities work together to increase our collective and personal wellness and self-care resources? Yeah, and it'd be great to hear from both organizations. Sue?
Oh, I can
Oh, Elliott, yeah,
go
great.
with that one. I think it almost sounds trite, but it is important that we listen to each other. You know, I think it sounds trite because we push a lot of listening and we don't necessarily push a lot of action after we listen. But I think listening is important. And I had all these thoughts from the last question of what community wellness looks like in systems, and especially the criminal justice system. You know, I'm not a lawyer or any sort of expert before coming into this position, so I've learned a whole lot. But those systems and the mental health system and, you know, health system and insurance, they are so hard to navigate. And that is a huge part of what NAMI does, is our helpline and taking calls from people that are like, you know, my son was arrested, he was in a mental health crisis, you know, what do I do now? And they're so inaccessible. And it is just, you know, I mean, honestly, it's appalling how much the systems don't listen to the people. How many times people say, they just need help. I don't want them to be arrested. Like, I'm the victim, but this isn't a crime. This person needs help. And the systems just ignore that. And then all of a sudden you're in a courtroom, you have charges, you have a felony, you can't get access to housing, you can't get access to insurance or employment. And it all just really starts because we have these systems that don't listen to what people really need. And that's really difficult. So I think both ways, like we've already discussed, systemically, we need to listen to what people are saying actually we want, which I think is incredibly pertinent in South Minneapolis right now. But also, as we work together, organization to organization, you know, we need to listen and not bring solutions to people, you know, but listen to what they say the solutions are.
Also working together, I think NAMI and the Cultural Wellness Center is an example, but it doesn't happen. The two organizations do not work together. It's Sue and Atum who work together. So in every institution, there are people, and it's the very people inside who are given the opportunity or the privilege or the burden, who have the burden or the position, title, and so forth, of carrying things out that take those policies to the narrow places that they are taking. So working together is, at this point in time, the voice of people. Elliott, you're right. The listening, we have to listen twice as much as we talk. And we really have to listen with more than our ears. What's really going on? Is there silence? You know, are these institutions, when we work with a healthcare institution, we go to the doctor with people and we listen. And we leave the doctor and we listen again to what did that person hear. Next time we go to the doctor, if I'm not able to go with that person, or other people in our organization are not able to go, we make sure that person has a list of questions, a list of things that they want to have done, a list of things they want to have looked at. And then we go back and let the doctor and the nurse and the other people within the healthcare system know someone is watching you. We do the same thing with children in the schools. And what we have found out is if we are present, so it isn't an accident that the institutions don't allow and didn't allow family members to come. That's intentional. They want you to come in by yourself, alone, isolated, and thinking that you're crazy and nothing that can be done about what's happening. So that's how we work together. I think in the South Minneapolis area, we talked to over 1,000 people, as I said. Some of them were in the park, on doorsteps. People had these amazing things to say about what was going on to prevent infant mortality. But mainly what they had to say is, it's the institution's framing of it that even makes us have more problems with birth. They tell us not to do breastfeeding. They tell us not to stay at home with our parents. They tell us, and on and on. So in each institution are people who have bought into practices that can be changed. And it's people outside those institutions now who have a voice that as we come together, empowerment is almost a healing practice. To be empowered is to be a part of it. Empowerment is like being a part of healing. Empowerment is like self-care. Empowerment is also going to be challenging the disconnection that we all have. So working together means listening, talking, being together, sharing together, exchanging ways of doing things together, and to stand up and see what's going on and say what's going on in institutions or wherever we are. So this togetherness is really starting to be something that's very powerful, and I think healing, as I said.
The only thing
Thank
I would add, and I totally agree, when people feel like they can, that they have the information and the tools, right, to be able to, advocate for themselves and their family. I feel like one of NAMI's responsibilities is to make sure people know the information. So this last week, unbelievably, we've had several cases where kids have been marked truant. They're in special education, which isn't being carried out because of it's a pandemic, right? And you don't refer a 6-year-old to truancy who's on an IEP and has autism. I mean, that makes no sense to me at all. And what people didn't know was that the governor actually had an executive order telling schools don't mark any kid truant during the pandemic. Well, families didn't have that information. So, we did our best to try to get that information out. Families used that in emails to the school saying, look, this is what the governor said. Don't mark my kid truant. Don't get me involved in the county and child protection and all of those kinds of things. And so we also feel like a part of our responsibility is to make sure people have that information about how to fight some of these institutions so that they're empowered to be able to do that. So if your kid's marked truant, know that that's not right and you have a way to fight back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we are starting to get some of the audience questions coming in, so we'll transition to that. Yeah, so much there. So some of the words that I'm just still holding, listening, and the true difference between how people can relate to each other versus systems, and how important it is to have information and to speak out about what we know when we're able to. So there's this beautiful question to start us off with from the audience. How do you stay moved from the heart? I catch myself using fear-based messaging to motivate progressive ideas, and then realize I am maintaining the message of separation that I want to change. I'm happy to repeat it if that's helpful. Oh, it's in the chat now too. Is this the Cultural Wellness Center? Yeah, Minkhara, go ahead.
It's a big question, partly because, again, I think I don't think that we're taught or trained to listen to ourselves in a way that is empathizing. So part of the way that I've learned, again, I've learned through being around people, being in community, taking care of my mother, taking care of my children, taking care of people, that part of what allows us to stay connected to our own hearts is like, and not to feel like we have to proselytize and to convert people to where we are, is really that the work that we do from day to day that is about just taking care of the people in front of us. It's a lot of work to raise adult children. I have a 24-year-old and a 21-year-old, and they are, by all accounts of this society, quote unquote adults. They should be able to do what they need to do on their own. But I found that that's not true, and I have a suspicion as a result of being parented up until my mom transitioned, that's probably what's going to happen, is that I will be parenting and they will be childrening until the end, and then that will start over again. And I think that that's part of the way that we have to understand being anchored and being moved by our hearts, is that this is a lifelong process that we're committing ourselves to. It requires that we feel. It requires that we relate to. So policies are not about feeling. Policies are about kind of, this is matter of fact, this is what we do. You have 3 chances to not be absent, and we didn't get to ramp up what we do to motivate you to do it, even though that's painful for the person who's supposed to do it and for the person who's receiving the doing. That's the way that society functions, and you're supposed to just kind of click in. And it's the clicking in that's automatic that forces you out of your heart. And in some ways, the rebellion is to resist the clicking, to resist being clicked into place, and to be fluid, to be able to have the sense of, I'm doing this because it's part of my purpose. I'm not a cog in a wheel. I do this because if I don't do this, my sanity will be compromised. So I think that, oftentimes we're attempting to convert people, which is what moves us out of our heart. And what convinces me to stay present in my heart is the condition that I face every day and the conditions that I see my children face as a result of our collective experience, that they don't get out of kind of the generational impact of being systematized and socialized as objective beings that has happened for the last 2,000 years in the West. So that's the sort of thing that I think we're talking about, which is really about, again, studying yourself, listening to your own heart, and this inner journey, which forces you to say, what did I do to take care of myself, in the sense of empathize with the conditions that we are all attempting to survive. Brutality is a real condition. People are being brutalized in the workplace. People are being brutalized by their physicians. People are being brutalized by clinicians who don't know what real listening looks like, who don't know what real caring looks like, because the training says this is how I have to do it, and it's almost automatic. It's you are in automation, and when you get to automation, it can be problematic. So.
Can I add something? One of my favorite organizers that's really inspired me to do work around the criminal justice system is Mariam Kaba, and she said once, she learned this from a nun, I think, that hope is a discipline. And I think that we often think about fear and what motivates us as if the feelings start first and then, the actions later. But, really, and this I think I've learned from Sue, because Sue is just laser focused on what can be done and then doing that. Because if you go to the legislature, you go to the Capitol, there's a lot of people that want to get a lot of things done. There's 5,000 bills every session, and 4,500 of them are not going to go anywhere. And they don't go anywhere because sometimes people, stand up with their big ideals and they start preaching at the testimony stand, but we want to see what can get done. And so I think that inspires me, that hope is a discipline. So it's both a practice of saying, what can I do today that will take us one step further? And it's an acceptance of, I can't do everything. And no one can do everything, but I think fear is kind of the language of staying frozen. If fear is what motivates us, we're not actually going to go very far. But focusing on what I can do and how we can get there and who's already doing that and can I join them, I think that is the place to start for motivation for me. And it's very hard. It definitely is hard, but I think that's what discipline is. A lot of time it's very hard to get going.
I just have a quick one. I really love what you have both said. Fear is also in my work from the head. My study tells me that fear is from the head, and that motivation and courage is from the heart. That this unstoppable force that the heart brings is like the heartbeat. It's going to continue. It has a rhythm. It is connected to life. It is connected to living. Fear, on the other hand, is artificial, and it's in the head, and it's in many, many cases with us as people recovering from having culture destroyed. It is placed there for purpose to paralyze.
Thank you all. I feel like that line, Elder, that you shared, the unstoppable force that the heart brings, it was like a container for what both Minkhara and Elliott were bringing in a way. Yeah. Okay. Slightly against my nature, I'm moving us along because we have really good questions here coming in. The next one. How do you take quote unquote self-care deeper? How do you take self-care deeper and define and apply community and organizational care, wholeness, healing and wellness? I feel like this one has been touched on, but maybe if you focus on the organizational piece. Right. So broadening and deepening self-care within the organizational context. Yeah, and I think, yeah, go ahead, Sue, whoever wants to start.
Go ahead, Elder.
Oh, I actually, everyone knows that I'm just so strong. I believe strongly that culture is really a place to start. This idea of what is in culture, what is culture, examining culture. There are many, many ways that culture is talked about. But in the case of the work that we're doing, we're talking about moving from race to culture to creation. And this cultural knowledge, cultural ways, cultural rituals, ceremonies, practices, is both personal, it's collective, it's communal, and it's organizational. So in the organization, the same practices and the same ambiance that exists within community, within the personal, and within the home, that same ambience, that same set of rituals and ceremonies and practices, the same kind of symbols that are created, whether it's, if it starts with the culture, as we examine it, and once again, we're talking about the symbols and customs and beliefs and practices that people create for continuity and across generation, and spirituality is always a part of that. But if those practices of culture are inside of us and is a part of the knowledge that we share with each other and the ways that we work together, it will also be in our institution.
I would just add that just within organizations, it's really, because our focus, is kind of broad and more on mental illness, obviously, than wellness, but really making sure that, staff have access and time and permission to actually take care of themselves. When we moved into our new office, we made sure that we had a wellness room. People can go in there, they can meditate, they can, adult coloring, I mean, whatever it is that they need to kind of, help themselves at that time. A wellness board with ideas. During COVID, we've actually, to really promote self-care, everyone can get an hour of holiday pay as long as they take a picture of what they did for self-care that time and they send it to me, and then we share it with the staff every week. And just to remind people there are different things that you can do, just really kind of promoting it and making sure that it's acceptable and that we really want people to take care of themselves. I think that's an important part of an organization as well.
So that's really good. And I think of the personnel policies and the job descriptions and the governance structure with our board, the way we talk about our goals and objectives, and somebody talked about a strategic plan. All of those things are inclusive of culture and vision, and also inclusive of what is the next generation of people going to, what do we leave, so that they can also see that when we talk about culture and cultural wellness as an approach, that it is throughout the organization. So we try real hard, as you have said, Sue, to make it practicable within every aspect of our organization. How we supervise, how performance is done. It's done from a self-study point of view. People laugh at us because employees who work with the Cultural Wellness Center do their own performance evaluation, and they come and tell us, a team, well, how did you do this year? What values? What did you learn? How many partnerships did you create? How much did you give as a result of the fact that you earned a salary? I mean, we really try to have those conversations so that people can see that wellness for us is not about an individual. It's about a collective view and vision. And then we try to perfect those things. And we don't always successfully perfect them, but everything is a learning. So if we have a bad day, then we go back and study. Well, what happened? Was I mean to you? If someone says that, yes, you were, stop and realize that, there's something happened that day that was about me, and I need to correct that. So it's a little bit of me going off on a tangent, but every place we go, those cultural practices really at this point in time are following us. And I'm hoping that we can get this idea of moving from race to culture to creation. We want to get it to be a part of the plan for wellness, not the plan for individual wellness, but cultural wellness and community wellness and wholeness and health. And so we'll keep pushing that together. So we'll do that together, and that will help us to be our minds, to be healthy. So
we have more in common. We'll have to talk afterwards too.
yes,
we do our reviews that way too.
yes.
Elder, I was going to add that I think as an employee of the Cultural Wellness Center, that I feel like that is how we function. I feel like that's one of the reasons I actually accepted a position as an employee, is because I felt like this is a job where taking care of yourself isn't about like some, again, just kind of this trivialized kind of like the things that people do, but it's more embedded in the actual practice. Like, what happened for you as a result of what you've been doing? Did you actually see in your own practice transformation that could benefit the community or your family? So in terms of studying, and in terms of practicing, it's an embodied experience that I think gets created at the Cultural Wellness Center, and that is experienced, I think, from people who might consider themselves volunteers, or from people who are active participants in the Cultural Wellness Center work, like the board members and other folks who actually actively participate, study, and then as a result give back. But it's embedded in the governance that people are. The mission of the Cultural Wellness Center, is for people to heal themselves and to create community, to unleash the power of people to heal themselves and to build community. That embedded in people's innate nature is to take care of themselves and make life better for themselves. That there is no magic systemic thing that people can do, but that the natural process of being in community can contribute greatly to it. But we've so sterilized our processes that we no longer know what wholeness looks like, because we have to ask questions about, like, how do you define wholeness? When if you look in the mirror and you see tears in your eyes, that is a sign of a whole human being. If you look in the face of someone else and you see despair, that is the symbol, that is the creator's symbol of a whole human being sitting in your presence. And we are obligated to pause and to sit with that spirit in order that the creator and creation can be whole again in us. Like, it's not separate. It's not a mystical thing. It's a real practical embodied thing that moves from people to institutions, to communities, to families, and on. So thank you.
I think we'll take a couple seconds without words. And if somebody has host capacity, maybe Grace, can you spotlight Julie's beautiful illustration after Minkhara's words and the other panelists?
I just want to thank everyone for all that you said. It was great to have the honor to be here and do this and to listen to everything. And I particularly liked when someone said, hope is a discipline, and fear freezes you. That was really inspiring, because when we're gripped by fear and despair, it is hard to move. And I'm trying to make art about that too, like just get up and get moving, because sometimes during COVID, it's just you wake up and you don't want to get out of bed. So thanks a lot. That was really inspiring.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks so much for your artistic gift. And thank you so much to the 4 panelists, to Elliott and Sue with NAMI, and for all your continued work and advocacy in our communities. And to 2 teachers of mine, Elder and Minkhara, thank you so much for sharing the guidance and the wisdom that the Cultural Wellness Center has to offer our communities. Deep gratitude to all 4 of you and everybody who stands around and behind you and with you in your work. And there is an announcement in the chat that I just want to be sure to respect. A community member who wants folks to know about Wellness Wednesdays. So you can look in your chat function and get the information about that. Speaking of community wellness and how we can care for each other. And a big thank you again to Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association, Tabitha and the other staff members here, Ashley and Grace, and all the other team members at PPNA for their continued work in the community in Powderhorn and beyond, and for bringing us the Southside Summit in 2020.
Well, thank you, Nicole. I'm just going to jump in because you're beating me to some of the punches of my thank yous, because you're trying to thank me before we thank you, which is not okay. But we are going to rectify that right now. I am humbled that we get to end on such what I think is a very powerful note, not a whole note, and it represents a whole summit. So I just have to express all my deepest gratitude to tonight's panel, Sue Abderholden and Elliott Butay and Minkhara Tizet, and certainly my dear friend and just just everything in so many ways, Mother Atum, thank you for being with us. I just have to ask, it will only take maybe an additional 2 minutes for those that can hang. We are recording this, but because this is the end of our first annual Southside Summit, I am just going to speak out every name who has contributed or played a role this whole week. We just want you to know how grateful we are to your support and to your willingness to walk alongside us in this way. First and foremost, thank you to every single person who decided to take an hour or 2 or 3 or 6 or 12 to attend a portion or all of this summit. I can't say all of your names, but know that you will receive or have already received a small thank you, acknowledging that we see you and appreciate you being in this space with us. And we know and we believe that you were able to leave with something that will serve you well on this journey of us not being bowed or bent by election or crisis or pandemic or whatever else may come our way yet in 2020. I'm not trying to speak it up. We certainly all believe that it's been a full enough year, but you never know. And I believe that many of these community organizations and leaders and people who have given us this community light will continue to help you to navigate whatever is ahead. But specifically, I just want to take a moment to thank all of our panelists, starting with Vanessa Del Campo, Chloe Jackson, Eliane Farhat, Sarah Washington, Carrie Wayne Saffold, Reggie Prince, Baba Letang, Elena Garter, Rose Tang, Nachek, Akira Yano, Ansha Zaman, D.A. Bullock, Lex Horan, Sue Abderholden again, Mother Atum, and Minkhara Tizet, and Elliott Butay. Please know that you have our deepest, deepest appreciation. I think that you have planted so many seeds for so many ways that will be able to grow and flourish beyond even these sessions. We want to give a special shout out to our artists who have held us down, who allow us to reflect back parts of the sessions in ways that we could not possibly imagine. That includes Jandayi Berry, Corey Lynn, Julie Chow, and all the artists with Studio Fallow who have been popping in and out all of the sessions to be able to help us to create a mural that we certainly will be able to make accessible and shareable to the community. For every single one of our moderators, many of whom are our board members, so I will not say your name twice, but Kelly Pyatt, Shanae Herbert, Tara Beard, Yordi Solomon, Lily Lamb, and certainly last but not least, Nicole Duxbury, for helping us to end in such a strong way. We want to give a shout out to our council members who helped us to help reimagine this event several different times as the pandemic changed our course. Julie Guidry of Upstream Arts, Carla Goodwin of the Graves Foundation, and Jay Hushin, who holds down and helps to hold down Reclaim the Block. And certainly our board members who, again, I've already mentioned some, whether as a panelist or moderators, but in addition, our board chair, illustrious no less, who was just voted in as a second term, Kevin Ely, Marty Hamid, who is our vice chair, Megan Hernick, Louis McCoy, who is an amazing secretary, and Soda Coy and Sarah Bagwell. We thank you. We appreciate your willingness to continue to serve this community in very dynamic ways. We want to get in a shout out again for the Graves Foundation for helping to help us to realize this year's event. And we hope that they will continue to be partners with us in this work. And again, last but certainly not least, 3 of the most amazing women who helps me to strive to create the right culture for them so that they can go serve more mightily when they move beyond PPNA. And that is Ashley Bradford and Grace Berkey and Hannah Kamath. It is everything that we give back to you just a little bit. We are so appreciative of your service. Yes, spotlight on Ashley, who is our event coordinator and juggles a ton on our behalf, and Hannah, who is our communications manager, and Grace Berkey, who is our community coordinator. We just are so thankful. We are at the end of our road and it's 7:36. We're 6 minutes beyond time, but we appreciate you for hanging on and hanging tight to let me get through those thank yous. Certainly, I am remiss if I missed anyone. Please charge it, of course, to my head and not my heart. We see you, we appreciate you, and we hope this year's summit was of value. Thank you for spending just a little bit of your evening with us. Have an amazing weekend. Stay warm and, if possible, COVID-free.